Hello, today we're going to learn about volume. Volume is the measure of space taken up by a solid object. Today we're going to focus specifically on rectangular prisms. In this example here, we are given a rectangular prism. In fact, the length, the width, and the height are identified. In order to find the volume, you need to know what the length, the width, and the height are. Now there's two ways you can find volume. In this example here, we actually have the cubes that create this rectangular prism. And if you are given many cubes that create that rectangular prism, you can actually count how many cubes are inside this rectangular prism and how many cubes are used to create the rectangular prism. Whatever the number is, if you were to count all those cubes, that would be the volume. Because again, volume is the measure of space taken up by a solid object. So if you were to count how many cubes you had that created that rectangular prism, that would be your volume. If you don't have access to cubes to count, or maybe the numbers are just so high and you'd have a lot of cubes, you can also do something else. In this example here, I'm going to use these cubes to help me identify the length. So here my length is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm just going to write 6 units here. And I have a width. We're going to count my width. 1, 2, 3, which is also 3 units. Just put a U for units. And my height is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 units here. Now the first thing to find volume is you need to find the area of the base. Here, my base is a rectangle. So to find the area of my base, I could do length times width. And we see that my length is 6 and my width is 3. So 6 times 3 would be 18. However, we can't just have the area of the base, we also need to factor in my height. Therefore, I'm going to take the area of my base and multiply it by my height, which this is creating a formula known as length times width times height. And this formula is what we're going to use today. So here I have my length of 6 times my width of 3 times my height of 6. So we know that 6 times 3 is 18, and then 18 times 6. I'm going to just write this on the side, which when we're solving today's problems, you will need scrap paper to do some of the math on the side. And we're simply just going to multiply here, giving me an answer of 108. So now here my volume is 108 cubic units. Now you might see it written as units cubed with an exponent of 3 representing cubed because I have units times units times units, which gives me units cubed. You can spell it out as 108 cubic units, or you can write it as units cubed. Either way works. Now for these next problems here, we're given another rectangular prism. The first thing we're going to do is first recognize, wow, my length, my width, and my height is all identified, which is great because now I can use that to find the volume. What I'm going to do here is my volumes, my length times my width times my height. So now here I have a length of 6 times 8 times 8 for my height. Notice here, 6 times 8 is the area of my base, and then I multiply it by my height. So I know that 6 times 8 is 48, and then I still have 48 times 8. Now notice I'm taking this into a few steps just to prevent mistakes from occurring. So now on the side, I'm just going to write 48 times 8 to determine my final answer. Now notice again, I'm using scrap paper here to write my work on the side. That's okay to do. 8 times 4 is 32 plus 6. We're left with 38, so giving me an answer of 384. Now again, units is very important to include. You have meters cubed, and you can also spell out cubic meters as well. For this problem here, to find the volume, again, we're going to follow the same procedure. My length is 5 centimeters. My width is 3 centimeters, and my height is 5 centimeters. So now 5 times 3 is 15 times 5. Now 15 times 5 happens to be 75 cubic centimeters, or you can write it as centimeters cubed, either one. Now notice here, again, we were given rectangular prisms. We were given the length, the width, and the height. In order to find the volume, you are simply multiplying the length times your width times your height. Now in this example here, we're given another rectangular prism, except I noticed that one of my values is a decimal. Now as we've discussed in the past, when you're measuring things, when you're measuring the length or width or height of objects or anything, you need to recognize that you might not always have whole numbers. You will have decimals and fractions as well. So it's important that we're able to follow the same method and strategies, but using decimals and fractions as well. So in this problem here, I'm still going to follow the same procedure. My length is 2 times my width of 8/10 and times my height of 1. Notice I'm still doing the same procedure as the last problem, and I'm going to take it into 2 steps again. So I have 2 times 8/10. Wow, let's see, 2 times 8/10. This brings me back to some memories of multiplying. Now let's see, I recognize that I have a decimal point. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to multiply by 10 to eliminate my decimal point. And by doing that, I move that decimal to the right. So now I have 2 times 8. And I know that 2 times 8 is 16, but we know that 16 can't be my final answer because I multiplied by 10 in my question. So that means in my answer, now I need to divide by 10. And when I divide by 10, that's telling me I'm going to be moving my decimal point 1 place to the left, giving me a final answer of 1 and 6/10. Now I see here that I have 1 and 6/10 times 1. And we know that 1 and 6/10 times 1 is just 1 because anything times 1 is itself. So therefore the final answer to this problem is 1 and 6/10 millimeters cubed, or you can write and spell out cubic millimeters as well, and that is the volume of this rectangular prism. For this next one here, we have another rectangular prism, a little bit larger numbers, but still something we can easily solve. So what we're going to do is follow the same steps. My volume equals my length is 15 and 5/10 times my width of 9 and 2/10 times my height of 15. Now I'm going to take this into 2 steps just like I did for the previous problems. What I'm first going to do is now multiply my length times my width, which is actually my area of the base. So I'm going to write 15 and 5/10 times 9 and 2/10. Now I hope this is bringing back many memories of multiplying decimals. I'm going to eliminate my decimal point by moving it 2 places to the right, 1 here, 1 here. So that's telling me I multiplied by 100. So that means whenever I get my final answer after I multiply, I'm now going to have to divide by 100. So now I'm going to take this step by step. In fact, I will even change the color so it's easier to identify. 2 times 5 is 10, and notice all I'm doing is multiplying. Okay, I'm following my steps for 3 by 2 digit multiplication. Okay, and now here 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times 5 is 45 plus 4 is 49. 9 times 1 is 9 plus 4 is 13. I'm going to add everything together to give me a final answer here of 14,260, but we know that we multiplied by 10 in my question, so now we need to divide by 100 in my answer. So now when I divide by 100, that's telling me I'm moving my decimal point 2 places to the left, giving me a final answer of 142 and 6/10. However, we're not done. Now we have to take the area of our base and multiply it by our height. This part I will do in another color so it's easier to identify. So here again, we're going to set up my multiplication. Notice this is a few steps. That's okay. You have scrap paper, so you can easily write out your steps. Now here I only notice that I have one decimal point here. So I'm going to move this over one place to the right, multiplying by 10. So I'm just going to write times 10 here as a reminder to myself so I don't forget to do that in the end. And let's do this part in red. Now again, I'm going to do multiplication, same steps. Okay, same steps of multiplication that I've been learning about all school year. And now you're just applying it to help you find the volume. And now we're almost done here, keeping everything lined up nice and neat on my scrap paper. Let's add these together to get our values. And we will soon have the answer to this final problem, giving us an answer of 21,390. But we remember in my question I multiplied by 10. So now in my answer I need to divide by 10. And when I divide by 10, I'm moving my decimal point over one place to the left, giving me a final volume of 2,139 centimeters cubed, or you can choose to spell out cubic centimeters. Now notice when you're finding the volume of any rectangular prism, all you are doing is multiplying the length times the width times the height. Whether you have whole numbers, decimals, or fractions, it is still the same process. As always, this video is posted on my YouTube channel, so feel free to rewatch it at any time to help you with today's activities.